Hello, this is Mr. Henry. Welcome to Lesson 6.1, Part 1. The essential question today is, how do I find ratios and unit rates? Now, this is Part 1. Today we're looking at ratios. The next lesson we'll be looking at unit rates. Okay, so first off, vocabulary. What is a ratio? A ratio is a comparison of two numbers. Comparison of two numbers using division. Okay, so it's a comparison of two numbers using division. And that's going to be key in finding out what a ratio is and how we use them. And then finally, an equivalent ratio are two ratios that have the same value. Two ratios with the same value. Okay, so we're going to start by figuring out, or by how we can write a ratio. And there are actually three ways we can write a ratio. The three ways we can write a ratio, first off, well, let's see, the wins of the Steelers to the Eagles. So let's see, the wins of the Steelers, there's 10, to the wins of the Eagles, 8. This is actually one way to write a ratio, 10 to 8, with this word 2 in between. You can also have 10 colon 8. And the third way would be as a fraction, 10 over 8. And you would leave this as an improper fraction like that. So these are all three ways of writing the ratio of the wins of the Steelers to the wins of the Eagles. Okay, let's try letter B. It says here, the wins of the Giants to the wins of the Eagles. Let's see, the Giants had 1 win. The Eagles had 8 wins. So we can write this as 1 to 8, using the word 2. 1 to 8 with a colon, or 1 to 8 as a fraction. Pretty simple, right? Okay. Now for letter C, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to write the ratio of the Steelers' losses to the total games they played. Okay, so you're going to look at your chart and you compare the Steelers' losses to the total games they played. So pause the video. When you're ready to continue, hit play. Alright, so hopefully you found, well, the Steelers' losses. The Steelers only lost 6 times. And the total games they played, the Steelers played a total of 16 games. And if you didn't get 16, well, let's see. They won 10, lost 6, so altogether they played 16 games. Okay, so that's how I got my 6 to 16. I could also write this as 6 colon 16, and also as a fraction, 6 over 16. So those are the three ways to write a ratio. Now you'd be saying, Mr. Henry, it looks like this is a fraction. What kind of stuff can I do with that fraction? Well, you are allowed to simplify just like a regular fraction. So for example, example 2a says we're going to compare the Steelers' wins to the total games they played. Well, they won 10 and they played 16. If I write this as a fraction, I can simplify that like a fraction. So let's see, divide by 2. If I divide both by 2, I get a 5 and I get an 8. And 5/8 actually cannot be simplified anymore, so this would be the simplified version of the Steelers' wins to the total games they played. Okay, let's look at letter B. Letter B says the Giants' losses to the Steelers' losses. Well, I'm looking at my chart up there. The Giants lost 15 games. The Steelers lost 6. Well, simplify. 3 goes into both. So if I divide by 3, divide by 3, and I get 5 over 2. Well, can I change this into a mixed number? Would this change into 2 1/2? The answer should be no, it wouldn't. Why? Well, if you remember what a ratio is, looking back at definition, it's a comparison of two numbers using division. Two numbers. If I write it as a mixed number like this, I don't have two numbers anymore. This is not right. You would leave it as an improper fraction. Okay? So, I've done 2. Your turn to do 1. Letter C. You're going to write in simplest form, Eagles wins to their losses. So I want you to do the problem, pause the video. When you're ready to continue, hit play. Okay? Hopefully you did this. Let's see. The Eagles win. So they won 8 times. They lost 8 times. So simplify, I get 1 over 1. Now, for the same reason as here, you would not turn this into just simply 1. That would be wrong. Okay, we have to have two numbers as a fraction, not a whole number, not a mixed number, a fraction. Okay, so lastly here, we have example 3. In example 3 now, what we're doing is we're going to be comparing ratios, seeing which ratio is bigger. So let's see here. Who has the greater ratio of rock to alternative music? Well, let's see here. Mr. Henry, rock to alternative. Well, Mr. Henry, off to the side here, has a 25 to 23 ratio. And Mr. Dario has a 12 to 10 ratio. Well, these guys are fractions, so I could find a common denominator, rewrite the fraction, go through that whole big business again, or, much easier, if you have a calculator, divide. Turn this guy into a decimal, turn this guy into a decimal, and then compare your decimals. Now, I went ahead and did this ahead of time. This guy here turns into 1.2. This guy, if you divide, you'd hit 25 divide 23. This gives you a 1.08 It keeps going on. Well, which is bigger, 1.08 or 1.2? In this case, well, 1.2, because you look at your whole numbers, they're the same. Next digit over, 2 or 0. Well, 2 is bigger than 0, so that is the bigger number. So that's the bigger number. So Miss D'Addario had the greater ratio of rock to alternative music. Okay, refresh that before I give you one to try. You write your ratios as fractions, and then you change them into decimals. After you change it into a decimal, then, and only then, can you see which is greater. Okay? So, letter B. Who has the greater ratio of oldies to rock music? Who has a greater ratio of oldies to rock music? I want you to pause the video, do that problem. When you're ready to continue, hit play again. Okay, so let's set up our two fractions. Here's Mr. Henry, here's Mr. Dario. Mr. Henry, oldies to rock. Oldies to rock. 12 over 25. Compared with Mr. Dario, oldies to rock. 5 to 12. Now I went ahead and did these ahead of time as well. 12 to 25, if you divide that, you get a 0.48. Compared with 5 divided by 12 is 0.41. So who's greater? Well, 48 bigger than 41. So Mr. Henry has a greater ratio of oldies to rock music. Okay? So, just to summarize this lesson, go back through. the three ways of writing a ratio would be with this word to, with your colon, and as a fraction. You are allowed to simplify fractions, put them into simplest form, but you must leave them as a fraction. You can't have a mixed number or a whole number. Those would be wrong. And then lastly, to compare which ratio is bigger, you simply change them into decimals by dividing 5 divided by 12, 12 divided by 25, and then compare your decimals. And whichever decimal is greater, that one is the greater ratio. That's it for 6.1 Part 1. I hope to see you in the next lesson.